keeping up last week's theme of looking at games from over a decade ago, this week, rather than looking at a game that seems to feel like it has no idea what it really wanted to be, we're going to instead look at a game that knows exactly what it wants to be. A game that has a specific goal for itself and makes its own intentions clear within the first hour of gameplay, one with the confidence of a child dressed as Batman and that never lets you forget exactly what kind of adventure you're a part of. Myself and the FPS genre haven't always seen eye to eye, I've mentioned before. I like a good bit of shooty action and I won't pretend I don't, however I'm a rather particular little enemy when it comes to exactly what kind of FPS I'll engage with. I cannot stand modern military shooters, whilst they might sometimes do an alright story and possess decent gunplay, ultimately I find them to be too rigid and bland to keep my attention. I get that the goal is to try and create a more realism-focused experience, and if that's what the studio wants to do, more power to them, but realism is sort of what I'm trying to get away from when I play video games. I also have no patience for the cover-based shooter, spending half the game hiding behind a rock whilst engaging in a slightly more dynamic version of a carnival shooting gallery isn't exactly my idea of fun, and the shooter doesn't even have any teddy bears to reward you with. No, I like my shooters to be fast-paced and chaotic, the kind that sees a player needing to keep mobile as the bad guys sneak up on you and give you a shotgun enema. My brother-in-law told me about Bulletstorm a few years ago, I want to say 2015 or so, and we even installed it on my PS4. And then I went home because the installation took forever, and I gotta be honest, I wasn't really interested in the game really, I just wanted to hang with him. I bought the game some years later, probably around 2019, and after procrastinating for a further 4 months or so, I checked it out. Let's talk about what I saw, shall we? Bulletstorm is an FPS that follows a man named Grayson Hunt, formerly the commander of a unit known as Dead Echo, who served under the Confederacy, a future space-aged one, not the old American one. Only after being betrayed by his CEO, General Sorrento, he and his squad are on a bit of a revenge kick. Well, Grayson is out for revenge. His team kind of wants to just get out of Dodge, but I guess if I just found out I'd been killing innocent civilians for years, I'd be pretty pissed off too. We open on Grayson and one of his men toying with a captured bounty hunter and drinking heavily. After some fucking around, they boot him out the airlock and the group happen upon the spaceship Ulysses, aboard which is the good general who went in dry a few years back. Grayson and his team decide to attack. They do a metric fuck ton of damage, but also take an imperial shit ton to their own craft, and both vessels crash into the nearby planet. Okay, to clarify, Grayson decides to attack. His team don't really get a say, they're loyal to him though, so this act of terror or war crime or whatever you want to classify this as is something they just have to be a part of. I think one of them is vaguely on board. In the crash, one of Gray's men is severely injured and needs cybernetics to keep him alive, so whilst the doc mends him, we go out to scavenge for a power cell he needs, and here we get a proper look at the combat. Bulletstorm is an over-the-top action type game. You have a gun, sure, and when you point it at things and squeeze the trigger they genuinely get shot, which is a must, but you can also boot enemies into various hazards around the map and off cliffs if one is present. After a short stroll, we see one of the general's elite soldiers doing some killing, and after they bite the big one, we pick up an energy lasso that we can use to draw victims in for punishment. Long story short, after some shooting you get the power cell, your mate gets cyborged, but the rest of the crew get killed by the planet's locals, and you and your cyborg bro have to make your way across the planet to find a means of escape. The gunplay and combat are overall quite entertaining. The areas you fight in are wide open yet offer plenty of cover. I'm a bit ticked off by the health regen thing, but we all have to learn to live with disappointments, ask your parents. You're encouraged not to just sit around and shoot from a mile away. These areas are littered with explosives and various impaling debris, even plenty of sheer drops that make dispatching enemies quite fun and over the top. Run up to a dude and kick him into a cactus, then lasso a baddie and unload a magazine into his face. Kick a bomb ball into an unsuspecting git, then top it all off by power sliding into the next poor sucker on your murder list. Some enemies are faster and can avoid your lasso and boot, so you'll need to make use of the charged attacks you can unlock for your weapons at these resupply stations that can turn even the toughest brute into a puddle of guts. You don't get grenades, but after a time you pick up a gun that attaches bombs to enemies and you can try and boot the poor sucker into their mates and then boom. Also, given the fact that there are explosives everywhere, it's not like you'll ever need a frag, they'd be overkill. Not all guns are created equal though. My personal go-to for a useful loadout was the pistol you find early on that can fire an explosive flare that also sets enemies on fire and on its own has plenty of stopping power, and the aforementioned gun that sticks bombs to people. In battle, you're encouraged to kill enemies in weird and wacky ways, and by that I mean you build up skill points for every kill and get more when you kill enemies in more interesting ways, such as using cliffs or spikes. These points can be spent on ammo and clip upgrades for your gun, so it's best to be spectacular. You might wonder why all these supply drops are here and why you need to pay to use them when they are military devices. Well, it's because they were sent to the planet during a former military operation, and the boxes were set to only resupply soldiers who did a good job, and a lasso thing they carried recorded their efforts and decided if they were worth investing in. Oh, by the way, the lasso thing is why we can connect to these points and why we can use them, and it's the thing that's grading our performance. It does speak to the ethical practices of the military military in this universe and how they view the people who serve within, though in a fucked up kind of way I do kind of see the logic behind it. If a soldier is hiding behind a wall all day and not doing anything whilst their buddy is the god king of death and leading the force to victory, then I can understand why supplies would be prioritised for his majesty, though it doesn't make it not a dick move. Really, we're not meant to think about the ethics of the resupply system or the game's world at large. Probably. We're too busy shooting and contemplating the ethics of Commander Grayson and his team. Oh. Wait. Early on, we play a flashback segment where Gray and his squad are still working for the General and are performing an assassination. Only issue is, the target is a journalist preparing a report on the actions of Dead Echo up until that point. The squad believed their targets were gunrunners and slavers, however they were merely people the military didn't like very much and who the General wanted dead. He'd been using Grayson and his troop to slaughter innocents, and he turns on the crew as soon as they bring this up. Grayson is now an alcoholic and motivated by the desire for some revenge, and will go to just about any length to achieve this. Half of his crew dies because of this, he sinks a ship with over 700 people on board, he even slaughters his way through the unfortunate inhabitants of this world, who themselves were merely victims of an act of terror perpetuated by a downtrodden group. He's kind of a bastard is my point, however he does clearly possess some empathy. He feels awful for the deaths on his hands and the suffering of his comrade for which he is to blame. Grayson may be no better than the man he seeks to kill, but he does come across as remorseful about his role in everything. He's constantly reminded of his most recent fuck-up by his friend who is barely clinging to life and who is also in unending agony, and he's reminded of his past even more when he teams up with a lady soldier who is the daughter of a man he assassinated years earlier. There is a lot more to him than you might expect given the kind of game Bulletstorm is. I won't say he's a particularly complex character, in fact he often acts like he was written by a 14-year-old trying to make their friends laugh by making the big strong army dude say the word dick as often as possible. But credit where credit is due, he's at least mature enough to acknowledge his shortcomings, even if he does barely do anything to hide the fact that he still wants to kill the General, even though he is literally he and his bros only ticket off this rock. Now, you know me. I'm no prude. I swear like a sailor who stubbed their toe, fell down the stairs, then learned that your mum was unavailable that evening and had to settle on your dad, and I ain't got nothing against naughty language in general. But seriously, Bulletstorm, will you tone it down a tad? Adult screaming the word dick and using the R word non-stop isn't funny or shocking, it's just trying too hard, you know?
Go fuck yourself! You shitpaws give chase, I will kill your dicks!
What? What does that even mean? You're gonna kill my dick?
I didn't smile or laugh at a single line of dialogue in the entire game. I quickly got used to it. This was the norm for the game, and thus none of it could have any real weight or impact, though it didn't help that there wasn't a single joke to be found anywhere in the game. Swearing and saying dick on their own are not jokes. Shooting someone in the genitals isn't a joke. Using the R word like a 4chan incel isn't a joke. These could be elements of a joke for certain, but they're not really funny on their own, and it doesn't help that, again, this is the default of the game. Bulletstorm wants to be this edgy comedy, but even 10 years ago it didn't sound like my cup of tea. My brother-in-law and stepfather told me it was funny, and so did a few people I used to be friends with. I saw a few folks play it and I had a good listen to the dialogue, but it did nothing for me back then, and I would, and still do, laugh at the dumbest shit. Fuck, I still consider myself a fan of South Park 15 years after it stopped being relevant.
Now, Miss Grumpy Tits. Maybe the dialogue and humour just isn't for you. Did you at least enjoy my gameplay there?
Yes.
I really don't like that stuff.
No, I'm sorry, yes, your gameplay is fine. Pretty fun, mostly.
Wait, mostly? What did I do wrong?
Well, let's start with the technical issues, shall we? The game isn't the most well put together. The first time I played, I encountered a bug that prevented me from progressing because a section of floor opened up too soon. It was meant to drop you down so you could move forwards, but you cannot jump or drop on your own, so I was just kind of stuck there. I had the game crash on me a couple of times back then as well, though credit where it's due, it didn't do it this time. This time around, one of the final cutscenes forgot to include Grayson's lines, and it's clear he's meant to be speaking. Look, he's moving like he's talking, but there are no words or anything. I'll let this cutscene play and you can see for yourself.
That puke dick, right there! Same man killed my crew and your final Echo squad.
You...
Your AI partners will either get in the way of your shots or do fuck all to help you in combat, and they never change from using the default assault rifle. The movement isn't great, it's fine when you're just walking, but sprinting feels stiff and awkward to control, and the slightest bit of obstruction in the environment will stop you dead in your tracks. The previously mentioned default assault rifle hits with all the weight of a drunk butterfly with a broken fist, and you cannot swap it out for another weapon. You can have 3 guns on you at a time, but the assault rifle is a clingy BF and always needs to be one of them. Still, it's far better for long range shooting than the sniper rifle is, which has my vote for the worst gun in the game. Now, a rifle that lets you slow motion guide bullets into an enemy's arsehole sounds like fun on the surface. I even cracked a smile the first time I got to do it. However, in practice, it makes sniping enemies take all the longer because you have to do this each time, and enemies always move at the last second as the bullet approaches. If you don't use the scope, then it won't do that, but it's a sniper. Using the sights is like kind of the point. It's fucking tedious, my lovely viewer. Again, it was a fun idea on paper, and maybe if the slow motion thing was a special bonus power you could opt into, then it would have been fine, but it's annoying as a default. The miniguns you can find have the battery of a 4-week-old iPhone, and the shotgun looks impressive, but really ain't that great even for crowd control. You're better off kicking and lassoing your way to victory. But I guess the question we have to answer is the game fun enough to compensate for these issues?
And you're going to say yes, right?
Well...
Are you kidding me right now? I'm a fast-paced, action-oriented shooter. I don't take myself too seriously, and yet I offer a competent plot with some character development. What could you not like?
Look, I can't help it, Bulletstorm. You're not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. Your combat is mostly well put together and fun enough to engage in without encounters themselves feeling tedious. It's just I sat through most of the game with a fairly neutral expression. I think the issue is that you're trying too hard, you know? You're not letting the badassery come naturally. You're phoning it in, and badassery is not something that you can force. You're trying too hard to be edgy and cool and kind of end up missing the mark as a result. Grayson and his mates look like they were trying out to be Gears of War protagonists but couldn't afford the proper costumes. And the big bad is so utterly one-dimensional that there is no satisfaction to be had in his inevitable downfall. He's not a charismatic villain with a vision who speaks sense, he's just a dickhead who badly needs to be hit by a bus. It doesn't help that in combat, whilst the shooting and murder are all fun enough, you get health back by hiding behind a rock for a bit and letting it regenerate because you just couldn't shake the trend. It can be lethal to the pace of a combat encounter to just sit around and wait for yourself to stop bleeding. Actually, back on the downfall of the general for a second, we don't even really defeat him. Spoiler alert, I'm not doing the card. At the end, we beat him up with a series of quick time events and he gets incapacitated, but after the credits we hear his voice again, so it was all for nothing, and we left Grayson and this lady, who is the most generic action woman hero you can find, floating in an escape pod. Sequel bait much, people can fly. I heard a rumour that there'll be another Bulletstorm game at some point, but it's been over 10 years now, and whilst I prefer games take all the time they need to be made well and in a way that's not harmful to the developers, I don't have any faith in a game that takes this long to produce. I'm reminded of Duke Nukem Forever and its decade-long development cycle that saw it shift engines and styles over and over. Funnily enough, you can play this game as Duke Nukem himself using a DLC pack, and that seems like it's trying to tell us something. Again, no, this was just a rumour, and truth be told, I cannot muster any interest to open a tab in Google to see if it's true. I'm literally writing this original script in Google Docs, and I cannot even be bothered to move my mouse all the way to the top of the screen just to check. I don't care. Bulletstorm is a competent shooter that manages to avoid many of the usual trappings, and one that works hard to carve out an identity of its own, even if it does come across like the work of a group of kids trying to make each other laugh. I did willingly play through the entire campaign in the course of a single Saturday and was engaged enough throughout, so I'll state again, the game isn't bad. I wouldn't have done this if it was. I realise I didn't speak much about the other characters because as far as character goes, Grayson got most of the character. The Lady Triska is probably the second most developed, but again, she's hardly complex. None of them were annoying enough to make me mute the game or turn off the TV, so there's that. I just don't think it's funny or anywhere near as clever as it seems to think it is. It's an alright way to kill a few hours. There is multiplayer as well, but I cancelled my PS Plus subscription, so I can't play it. Okay, I could. I have it until February. I just don't want to. Multiplayer is not that interesting to me. The single player though, that's alright. I've seen worse. I think if there is a sequel, it needs to ease up on the swears and have a bit more of a build up to the more over the top and silly elements so that they have more impact. At the core though, there is a fun shooter, and I suppose at the end of the day, that's all we can ask for. Thank you for watching, don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you're new. Also, feel free to leave a comment, I like reading comments. If you want to as well, you can support the channel on Patreon. From the 7th of January this year, I'll be posting all my reviews in written form for the supporters if that's your cup of tea. Anyhow, thank you again my lovelies, and we'll see you next week.